Welcome to the week that was, but we mostly wish it wasn't for the week ending August 1st, 2025. This is a weekly roundup of the highlights and lowlights and major stories concerning campus anti-Semitism and campus anti-Zionism. This week I had about 35 stories to choose from. If something is happening in your neck of the woods, please be sure to let me know. I am your host, Andrew Pessin. I am a professor. Please don't hate me. For more about me and my work, please visit andrewpessin.com. And for all the details of today's stories and loads more stories, just follow me on X at Andrew Pessin. Okay, let's get to the news. Top stories of the week. We'll start with several bits of not so bad news, some good news. Representatives Virginia Foxx and Josh Gottheimer have introduced legislation that would make colleges that engage in non-expressive commercial boycotts of Israel ineligible to receive federal student aid funding. It would require universities to certify every year that they're complying with the legislation, and the Department of Education would annually publish lists of schools that refuse to submit such certification. The University of Alabama signed a memorandum of understanding with Ben-Gurion University this week, starting a new chapter of academic cooperation between the institutions. Meanwhile, representatives from Ben-Gurion in Israel visited several other Southeast colleges, including University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, University of Alabama, University of Georgia, Georgia Tech, and Emory, hoping to establish similar cooperation. In that same vein, Harvard announces new partnerships with Israeli institutions this week. Harvard will begin a new study abroad program, again in partnership with Ben-Gurion University in Israel for undergraduate students, and is establishing a postdoctoral fellowship in the medical school, where medical school faculty will mentor and train newly credentialed Israeli scientists in biomedical research. So too, Harvard has agreed to cover the security costs for the campus Hillel, which I suppose is good news, but very sad and tragic that that's necessary in the first place. Harvard also, the federal government has determined that Harvard will not voluntarily correct and remediate its established violations of Title VI of the Civil Rights Code, i.e., the anti-Semitism problems there, and so has now referred the matter to the U.S. Department of Justice. So that's taking it up a notch. If Harvard does not reverse course quite immediately, this could lead to permanent, final, irrevocable taking away of Harvard federal funds and loss of Harvard accreditation. So big news there. Meanwhile, Brown University, in an effort to avoid a similar fate, has reached an agreement with the federal government. Most of that agreement seemed to focus on DEI issues and the trans-related issues. For example, Brown will adopt the definitions of male and female from President Trump's executive order. Um, there are small measures about Brown taking steps to improve the campus climate for Jewish students and combat anti-Semitism. Pro-Israel critics of this agreement say it's nearly worthless. It's really doing very little to address the institutional anti-Semitism there. For example, that which is generated from its prominent Center for East Studies, which is very virulently anti-Israel. In the legal department, it was a busy week. A new lawsuit has been filed against Princeton University and its top safety officer in particular for assaulting a Jewish student who was attempting to document some of the anti-Israel mayhem going on there this past year. A key issue in the lawsuit is the differential treatment, namely that Princeton essentially let all the anti-Israel students who were breaking all sorts of rules go without serious discipline and ended up going after this student who was simply trying to document their misbehavior and disciplining this student severely, including, as I mentioned, its top safety officer assaulting him. UCLA settled its major anti-Semitism lawsuit this past week, agreeing to pay over $6 million in fines. Um, uh, and part of that money will be directed towards a new UCLA initiative to combat anti-Semitism. As part of the deals, UCLA has agreed that, quote, it is prohibited from knowingly allowing or facilitating the exclusion of Jewish students, faculty, or staff from ordinarily available portions of UCLA's program activities and or campus areas. The very end quote. The very idea that that had to be said is quite shocking because, of course, it's simply the law that you're not allowed to exclude people like that. Nevertheless, it's now, I guess, in writing. This will, in an additional measure, include exclusion based on religious beliefs concerning the Jewish state of Israel, end quote. So, in effect, you're no longer allowed to exclude people for being Zionists. Uh, As part of this, UCLA was also found to be in violation of Title VI regulations, meaning it had behaved illegally, and it must now negotiate an agreement with the Department of Justice, or it will face more serious trouble, such as Harvard is looking at. Speaking of Harvard, once again, a Boston judge this week dismissed the assault and battery criminal charges against the two Harvard students who had assaulted and battered a Jewish student shortly after October 7th in a video clip that went viral. That Jewish student is now suing Harvard for its failure to take appropriate actions against those two students. Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP, had a busy week this week in the news. At the University of Michigan, nearly 3 months after the Michigan Attorney General had just dropped all criminal charges against a number of protesters who had broken various rules and laws, in particular with respect to the anti-Israel encampment there. The university itself has now issued formal conduct complaints against 11 student protesters. These refer back to 4 demonstrations from this past year, two in a year ago, May, one in July, and another one in October. That campus has been very busy with its anti-Israel activity, and many of the students breaking various rules, hence these conduct charges. The University of Wisconsin-Madison has become the latest university to suspend its chapter of SJP for just one semester, the upcoming semester, and this has to do with their violation of university policies at a protest this past April. SJP had protested an event featuring former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas Greenfield. It was determined that SJP had violated 5 university policies, including unauthorized distribution of flyers, obstruction to buildings, use of excessive sound, disorderly conduct, and breach of probation. They did all this while they were on probation. Occidental College has been holding disciplinary hearings this past week for their SJP, which brazenly disrupted a formal inauguration ceremony, slandered the institution with false accusations of complicity in genocide, and is now orchestrating a pressure campaign to evade all disciplinary consequences. K through 12 has also been a busy arena this week, as really every week it seems. The Anti-Defamation League has filed a formal civil rights complaint against Baltimore City Public Schools, alleging rampant anti-Semitism there. And we do have 2 items in the good news, but not so good that it's necessary category. Framingham, Massachusetts has rejected the Massachusetts Teachers Association educational materials on, quote, Israel Palestine for being biased, ideological, and anti Semitic. That is a big problem across the nation. Many school districts using materials that are deemed by many in the Jewish community to be anti Semitic, particularly in the realm of ethnic studies. And meanwhile, up north in Canada, Ontario's provincial government has appointed supervisors to oversee 4 major school boards, including the Toronto School Board, amid the escalating concerns about the rampant anti-Semitism and student safety there. Some naughty students this past week. We'll just mention 2. Florida State University, a female student attacked a Jewish peer at a gym who was wearing an IDF t-shirt, screaming at him, excuse me, fuck Israel, free Palestine, and physically shoving him, i.e. assaulting him. Congressman Randy Fine immediately posted that he would demand that she be punished under relevant Florida laws that he himself had authored. And Florida State has announced that the student is suspended pending expulsion hearings. Similarly, a University of Illinois student was expelled for vandalizing an auditorium with anti-Israel graffiti. One naughty professor this past week to mention, Canadian law professor from the University of Quebec wrote a post claiming that Israel is guilty of, quote, murder, persecution, extermination, apartheid, forcible transfer of population, and imprisonment. Finally, we close with some off-campus shenanigans. This is just a partial list of events this past week or so in Europe. Jews were kicked off of a Spanish flight, and Jews were prevented from disembarking a cruise ship in Greece. Jews were attacked eating at a restaurant in London. Jews were assaulted by a thug on a bus in Dublin. Jews were detained at a festival in Belgium for questioning. Jews harassed at a French airport by a staff member. Jews were physically attacked by anti-Israelis bearing knives on the island of Rhodes. A Jewish restaurant was vandalized in Germany. Jews were refused service in a restaurant in Vienna, also refused service at a restaurant in Italy. A Syrian refugee bit the ear off of a Jewish man in Greece. Jewish acts were pulled from the Edinburgh Fringe Festival over safety concerns, and Jews were denied entry to a campground in Austria. Just a little sliver of Jewish life in Europe in the summer of 2025. That's the news, unfortunately. Tune in next week to see what fresh horrors next week shall bring. Again, I'm your host, Andrew Pessin at andrewpessin.com, and hoping everybody manages to hold it together until next time. See you next week.